Dear friends, good evening to you all.
Good evening, greetings from Izmir.
We greet our friends from Turkey, and there are many friends following or watching us from Australia, from USA, from many European countries. I guess this is the best side of this whole pandemic.
Oh, yes. First, we thought that stopping our face-to-face lectures was so bad, then we noticed the positive sides of this. We entered into a much more productive, much more intense phase of working. Do you agree?
Exactly. Dear friends, starting from this evening, my dear sister Oya Emir, president of Izmir Spiritual Research Society, joins me as the new commentator in the Divine Order and the Universe Reading and Commentary series. Let me welcome her. Thank you, dear sister, you agreed to join me in this series.
Let me thank you for your invitation. This is such a valuable media for sharing this knowledge. You honored us, our society, with your invitation. Bilyay Foundation has such a special place in our lives. And you and I, with all other members, have been working together for many years. And this is a new kind of activity for us to be working together, in this series, during next 2 months. You had started with Bilgehan Meral, and continued with Tumerhan Meral and Umid Özdemir. 2 months with each of them. Wow, it has been 6 months already, and you shared so many good examples and comments with all of us.
I think we added a few extra weeks while working with Bilgehan. We started on October, now it is May, so 7 months. Yes, for the last 7 months we are online each Monday for this series.
How wonderful. And I am one of your regular followers, as well. Thanks to you, many readers gained new insights about the book. I hope, together with you, we can keep up this good pace. And of course, we look forward hearing from all of our dear friends, their comments, their questions. Because, we are in this, together.
Yes, with your questions and comments, we go over the passages we read here together, and try to find more examples to explain the concepts better and clearer. So, thank you for your attendance and attention, dear friends. And yes, if you are a newcomer, this is our 32nd video in this reading and commentary series, so, please watch the previous videos first. I am sure many of your questions about the Divine Order and the Universe, about Mr. Ruhselman and the knowledge given in this book will be answered. Alright, let's start reading from where we stopped 2 weeks ago. As studying the realities regarding the knowledge they concluded in the essence being, it is necessary to remember that they complement each other. In this regard, each reality is the piece of a whole which successively goes to the point that is needed to be reached by each reality's preparing for a higher reality. And actually, the refining experiences of a human being are but the impressions of these realities which have accumulated in the essence being as knowledge. That is, as a past reality prepares the future reality, the impression of the past reality remains present as well within the essence knowledge of the future reality. In fact, in this way, future realities widen as they gradually include the conclusions of past realities, and their scope increases, and causes the increase of refining experience of the being. For example, individual earthly cravings which complete the level where crude self-centeredness reality exists, becomes social selfishness in a higher communal plan reality, with a superior and encompassing character. If at the former level, a man only strives for his individual interests, at the second level he starts to work for the interests of a small community, of a family which depends on him. And this earthly craving, as the levels ascend, increases and widens by encompassing a community, a society, a nation, mankind, and even all beings, and as it orientates towards them it is necessary to call it consideration of others, not selfishness. Nevertheless, it remains in a state of earthly craving in comparison with a higher reality than itself. This situation indicates the states which are widening in scope and developing by the gradual feeding of the conclusions of the previous earthly cravings in the essence being by the conclusions of new elements, that is, the conclusions of the higher opposites. So, a reality of earthly craving which entails efforts to achieve a higher reality by standing against it, at the same time, is in a state of candidature to be mixed within this higher reality and vanish into the higher identities. Therefore, within the most advanced and highest realities syntheses that have turned into essence knowledge, there are the conclusions of the earthly cravings belonging to initial realities which have adapted to this knowledge and dissolved their initial dispositions within there.
We had started to read passages related to realities a few weeks ago. This is a very detailed and comprehensive topic. Now, in this passage we begin to learn about how the being's essence knowledge contains the realities as we go through these. First, let's remember that the book previously stated that the higher reality always encompasses the lower reality. And we see that each reality is a piece of a whole, complementing each other. And these sentences we read about realities encompass each other in an ever-widening manner, and starting from a certain point and reaching a certain point reminds me the development of a newborn. Well, I am a grandmother. And as I watch my grandchild's growth, it is easy to see and feel how all those realities follow each other, one on top of another, as a slow chain reaction. This is like a model to understand this passage we read. Let's remember. Starting from the moment a baby is conceived in the womb, and later, is born. Baby is only at the reality of taking. Baby is dependent on mother and needs to take from the mother all the time. Of course, after a certain period of time, that baby grows up and begins to give as much as she or he takes. And if the parents are in a certain level of reality, that child of youngster begins to pass to the reality of altruism. And when we take this example of development in the context of the essence being, and if we remember the contributions of our commentator friends in the previous weeks, we see how encompassing this is. That is, starting from formless and motionless matter and initiating motion in that matter by an original influence, ever-developing layers or levels are added on top of each other, and beings reached a high-level state in their development. And this book explains these sequential legs of our journey in the universe, from plant to animal to human stages, and how all those seemingly different realities are always complementary. And we will read and study in the further pages of the book that there is no end of this journey of further development. It will continue as it becomes wider, more encompassing. This book informs us about the further steps we will take in this journey.
This passage reminds me Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It nicely expresses the stages humankind passed and is still passing through. And it is closely connected with the topic of realities we have been discussing for a few weeks. Let me share an image of this hierarchy of needs. This is a pyramid. The bottom level is about physiological needs: air, water, food, reproduction, sleep, healthy metabolism, in short, survival. As you said about the basic reality of a baby, if we apply this level of reality to the developmental levels of humankind, we can say that this is the period of the primitive man. That period is all about survival. And when this reality is lived and fulfilled, then second stage follows. Safety, personal security, resources, jobs, health, property, etc. For the baby, the field of me gets larger. This is the stage of seeking safety and or relating with people and things. My toys, my mother, etc. And when the need for survival is met and humankind feels secure enough or to seek security in numbers, humankind begins to make relations with others in the vicinity, and also power struggles. Sense of connection gets stronger. Baby's world begins to include siblings, other family members, me and you, or even we, us. In that stage, humankind seeks intimacy and builds family, friendships, groups, communities, and power balances. Then comes a higher stage in the pyramid. The sense of self gets stronger and a baby, more correctly, a child expects to be taken into consideration, to his or her questions to be taken seriously, etc. And the humankind begins to make comparisons, set standards, morals, rules, and to respect others and to be respected by others becomes an indication of esteem. And at the top of the pyramid, we see self-actualization. The child, or more correctly, the youngster seeks proving himself or herself either by or against the rules and standards of the family. For the humankind, this is the phase of striving for more, either for self-interests or for the greater good, discovering the limits and trying to surpass those limits. And only after that stage comes the stage of asking big questions. Who am I? What am I? And virtues, creativity, sincerity, problem-solving, becoming non-biased, accepting reality as it is, such traits become more important. And when we look at these small and large-scale examples of these stages, we see that we don't jump from one reality to another, and also, humans as groups or nations do not change realities together at the same time. And in this passage, we read, future realities widen as they gradually include the conclusions of past realities. For example, individual earthly cravings which complete the level where crude self-centeredness reality exists, becomes social selfishness in a higher communal plan reality, with a superior and encompassing character. So, earthly cravings don't vanish but transform. I mean, let's say, a human being fights for his or her own survival at first, but later, this fight transforms into fighting for family, for a country, etc. In other words, this is like rehearsing for the duties in the plan of duty.
What strikes my attention in this paragraph is this phrase. The gradual feeding. I mean, we widen our scope by gradual feeding of our conclusions about the previous events. And this is a nice expression to explain how each event, each situation, each mood, each state, and each thought feeds us. Well, you know this very well that, each time we read this book, we discover new things, and this phrase, yes. This is today's discovery for me, because I just noticed that we exist by feeding. Not only as food for our bodies, but also for all levels of our development. Impressions feed us, shortly, everything in our vicinity and environ feeds us, and these are the factors preparing us for the next reality. And this phrase, gradual feeding, is a subtle way of expressing this. And another phrase. Higher identities. With each feeding, we also reach up towards the higher identities. If some of our friends are interested in or study the fourth way teachings of Gurdjieff, they already know that we are not one self, but we have many selves. And as our comprehension widens and as we gradually pass from one reality to another, we begin feeding some of those selves and not feeding some certain ones. And soon, we will read about how the identities we keep on feeding begin to pass to the higher levels, while the identities we stop feeding becomes diminished. That is, all those experiences, attitudes, states, and moods make deep impressions within our increasingly complex and encompassing structure, and open a path leading to higher identities.
Of course, a human is a multi-layered being, and I think we need to discern personality from identities of a person. The personality we have throughout a single lifetime is influences by many factors. If I can list some of these, first, the influences of the brain cells beings that will form the new brain of the fetus in the mother's womb. Then, general influences related to the life plan of the new lifetime. The influences the baby absorbs from mother's psychological makeup, the family environment the baby is born into, initial cultural influences in the child's formative years, etc. And in a given lifetime, as the personality of a human emerges, she or he will also have many identities. It is like life is a stage you are born into, and for the course of the play, you will play many roles in many costumes, such as an identity as the child of your parents, if you have siblings, a sibling identity. Then at schooling years, you have identities as teenager, student, youngster, later as graduate, employee or boss, lover, wife, husband, etc. The number of those identities increases as we live our lifetime. However, at the background of this personality and the identities it assumes, or more correctly, above them, we have our being, our essence. We are not only our personality, we are not only our identities. Our being, by utilizing the functions and inclinations of the personality and the identities within all those processes, acquires the impressions you just mentioned, and distills these to gain the essential knowledge out of these lifetime experiences. Our being, as the ensemble of energies and influences at a perceptual gathering point, is our existential umbrella that covers the physical body, the personality and identities of a given lifetime. And when that lifetime ends with death, the play also ends and we take off all the costumes and leave the stage. Of course, when we talk about higher identities, we must understand that this is a phrase that has meanings beyond what modern psychology posits. Yes, we assume or take on many other roles or identities as we advance in the path towards the plan of duty. We take on higher identities as we display conscientious or compassionate acts and states, and as we display selfish or spiteful acts and states, those identities are in lower levels.
You made this distinction and topic became much clearer, now. And the personality and its identities throughout a lifetime of a being, after death, they are like more or less different metals melting in a pot. All those myriad experiences and impressions, once distinct and vibrating in a certain wavelength, becomes merged within the higher vibrational pot of the essence knowledge. And if there are still missing impressions and knowledge, or in other words, unfinished business left behind, then our being and the beings in duty begin the preparations of a new incarnation.
All right, let's continue reading. Now, we will elaborate upon the problem of how realities prepare mankind for the plan of duty. The part of man that will pass into the plan of duty is not his body with its flesh, bones and neurons. The body needs to be buried in the earth with all its formations at the end of every world life cycle. However, there is another part of the man, not his body, which advances from his initial human life to the knowledge of duty, which is a superhuman plan, and this is his being, as we have previously explained. That is, what advances throughout the whole universe as gradually developing by using myriad matter in order to serve the spirit it is subject to is his being. And bodies are only vehicles for this being. Thus, all these realities and all components constituting these realities prepare not the human body but the being which uses it for the plan of duty. And the meaning of these is that world realities that have evaluated according to the human brain do not pass into the essence being in the same states and forms. And if this was the case, there would be no necessity for the body and the being could directly live in the world. So, what are the real values of the realities, those evaluated by the human brain, that we see and know in the world, which pass into the essence being and which need to be lived through for its preparation? These values that pass into the being are not the crude states and forms of the realities which have been adjusted to the world matter. These values are some conclusions which these realities bring about in the essence being as states of sublime and subtle matter combinations suitable for the subtle structure and the needs of the being. It is even not right to call these impressions. This is because this word does not convey here the complete meaning. So, these conclusions or impressions, whose disposition is very vague to human comprehension, are deep traces that cause the development of beings. And the meaning of the phrase of these traces deepening is the expanding and gradual encompassing of the essence comprehension belonging to that being and ensuring its evolution. Actually, because the essence comprehension is identical with the being, the expanding and gradual encompassing of comprehension is the development of the being in itself.
This last sentence is so important, I'd like to reread it. Because the essence comprehension is identical with the being, the expanding and gradual encompassing of comprehension is the development of the being in itself. Yes, we leave our physical body in the world. We have done this many times, who knows, for how many lifetimes. Because this physical body is a vehicle for our being utilizes to experience the world matter, and each lifetime is necessary for the gradual expanding and encompassing of the comprehension. Why? Because this is the development of being in itself. When we see our body from this perspective, things become so impressive, so magnificent. Imagine all those vibrations transmitted from our body to our being, all those emotions, thoughts, feelings, etc. These become like a transmission at levels subtler than world matter. And these ever-changing states and transmission bring out our corporeal body's day-to-day states, and in the other levels, like mental, astral, causal, And these bring out other bodies, with a different state of matter, but we don't see those bodies, don't perceive them. And because we don't perceive what we manifest by our transmissions in those subtler levels, when we talk about environmental pollution, we can only think about the pollution at the physical level, plastic pollution of the seas, landfills, air pollution, etc. However, we also cause pollution in other levels, like mental and astral. Regardless of the question which triggers which, I'd like to point that, again, all of these are matter, only at subtler levels, and when we die, we will leave these behind, as well. And when we think about the immense scope of the complexity of all those transmissions, not only of the humankind but all other beings in the world, animals, plants, minerals, we can see that we are a part of something incredibly transcendent. And then, I can understand why in this book we read that most of the things are beyond our comprehension and perception. And moreover, in addition to this physical level of immense complexity, we also transmit subtler knowledge of all those experiences we have on the world to our being that has a much subtler level. These subtler knowledge or values that reflected to our being are in an energetic structure, as we read in this passage. World realities that have evaluated according to the human brain do not pass into the essence being in the same states and forms. And this energetic structure is so subtle that their disposition is very vague to human comprehension. It is clear from this passage that all those conclusions and impressions become increasingly deeper, and this deepening, like a rut in a road, is very valuable for us. Because with each new incarnation, it becomes easier for humankind to follow these already deepened tracks or ruts of experience. I guess, we already have experienced many things we now experience, but we are now having deeper impressions and conclusions related to these. Yes, that's all I can say about this passage. What do you think?
I notice an important description here. World realities that have evaluated according to the human brain and the crude states and forms of the realities which have been adjusted to the world matter. It means that as we study the widening of comprehensions with each successive incarnation, we must take into consideration this fact, that is, we can perceive even the most transcendent experiences only as much as our brain's capacity of imagery. Our sight is limited, hearing is limited, sensing is limited. Still, within this limited structure, we are in the processes of gaining comprehension, of getting out of automatism, and of passing to higher realities. Therefore, our limited part, that is, our physical body, collects all those impressions and experiences, as if drawing blood out of a stone among those harsh and arduous conditions of the world life. And when this body dies, it reverts to its original form, to dirt, in other words, into its organic building blocks. But all those experience and knowledge accumulated in that lifetime does not vanish, but transferred or reflected to the being, our limitless part. Again, we see and understand in this passage that the physical body is just a vehicle of the being. The being governs this vehicle in a lifetime or in duration of an incarnation, by sending its influences to this vehicle. And when the being ceases sending its influences or withdraws its concentration, then death happens for the body. And for this vehicle or physical body, a lifetime means living at the depths of crude matter, in the midst of action and movement all the time, encountering events by reacting or responding. Therefore, our real criteria for the advancement and development of the being is not the worldly values. I mean, we cannot self-righteously say that only such and such beings advance, because after reading the divine order and the universe, we understand that beings advance by making choices from the earthly craving side of their duality unit, as well, of course, then they encounter and live the suffering consequences of such choices. So, after overcoming the world matter, the beings move towards much subtler realities and levels of matter, for example, like the semi-subtle realm of the plan of love, and there, the beings are in completely different states and situations, in higher and subtler matter combinations. And of course, the comprehension is of matter, too. We need to remember that everything within our universe is matter. There is nothing else but matter in a spectrum from the crudest to the subtlest. So, the question we need to ask at this point is, how can we deepen this track or rut of the impressions?
Alright. First of all, we know that for a behavior to become a habit, it requires repetition for a period of time. But even before this, we must know in which reality we are. Are we aware of this? Because, first, I need to know this: in which state, in which reality am I? Because, I need to know what is the behavior I want to deepen or I need to repeat, so can it become established. So before deciding on which behaviors or acts or states need to be deepened, I need to know the reality I am in. And after this awareness, I can add the knowledge of the states or acts I want to change or deepen. Next, I need a strategy or a plan to change whatever I need to change. And one intentional and determined step after another, as we repeat consciously, we may deepen the behaviors and deeds we want to establish, and of course, impressions gained by these. Yet, we know that big changes may not happen within a single lifetime. So, before asking how much we can change this or that, first we need to understand, what do we want to change? And responding this question is especially important because of the times we live in. As the world gets nearer to the end of its current cycle, we encounter more than usual events. So, self-knowledge becomes more important and even essential to evaluate those events, in order to respond properly and consciously. And as the observer within us gets stronger, our self-remembering gets stronger, then the impressions will deepen. And, responding this question of what do I need to change, well, our being helps us, makes it so easy for us because when we don't get the lessons they bring, events tend to repeat. And mostly, by becoming more intense. Like, our being makes it plain as our nose in our face, and tells us, you need to change this and that in this period of your lifetime. So, we can get the clues from the events we encounter, and as we discern the experiences that are more beneficial for us more and more, we can begin to work on these to make their impressions or traces deeper.
And this deepening occurs only if we are in the middle of life. If we avoid experiencing life, such deepening does not happen. I mean, this cannot be done by only reading books or watching TV. We must be open to many impressions coming from events, other people. And we already read in this book that we need to know about the consequences of our acts and deeds by seeing the reactions of others. This is valid for changing our behaviors as well. We need to see what is against this change within ourselves, and such triggering only happens when we are in the midst of the events. If we are afraid of something, we need to face this fear. This is the way of life. Life is not like an overprotective mother, trying to do everything possible to prevent any harm to their children. With its ups and downs, life prepares us for more complex and subtler changes.
And by doing this, we widen our comprehension. As we live through myriad events and states in life, we learn and experience more and more. We can observe this widening of comprehension in our individual life and in the communal life of humankind. However, it is a two-sided widening. This also happens at the comprehension of the being, as we reflect these to our being. After all, comprehension is the ferment of the being.
This reminds me this Sufi story about a dervish. When nothing happens in a day, he would ask, "My God, have you forgotten me? You didn't send any trouble today."
I guess, we are not forgotten at all nowadays.
Yes, the pressures of life are coming from all directions. All right, let's continue reading. As to the manner of occurrence of the realities in the essence being, as lived realities and all good or bad events which are connected to these realities make mankind happy or sad with their various appearances, they actually cause some formations and transformations in the essence being, by values suitable to the constitution of that being, which cannot be understood by man. In this way, within very sublime matter syntheses, they put into effect their subtle combinations which are in completely different forms and manners than their appearances in the world, by becoming enriched as they gain values. These are true essence knowledge of the spirits that serve their evolutions. So, as material forms and states, as we have just mentioned, of the realities among crude world matter continue by following and preparing each other, their conclusions, their companions, in the essence being feed the essence knowledge gradually accumulating in states which have much deeper and subtler meanings than their expressions in relation to the crude cosmos. These are real evolutionary values. Those who compare the concept of evolutionary values we previously talked about with the concept here will expand their intuitions a little more concerning in what manner spirits benefit from the universe. The essence comprehension that expands with essence knowledge, that is, the true comprehension belonging to the being which is above the milieu of body, and reaching to the end of universe together with the being, benefits from the manner of crude appearances of the realities it lives indirectly via the channel of the body in the world. And by this, it continues its services belonging to the evolution of the spirit it is subject to. So, after this knowledge is grasped properly, the possibilities of confusion and bewilderment by mixing the meanings of terms like realities both lived and forgotten have been cleared away. For, here, there are two screens which have become targets for events. One of them is the crude matter gatherings we call the physical, and the other is a subtle and complex being serving a spirit by utilizing this gathering. Crudeness of the body is good for receiving crude realities and allows the possibility of increase of essence knowledge in the being. So, what need to be forgotten when they are completed are the crude appearances of the realities addressing the crude bodies. And this is an imperative of the superficial comprehension of time, which we will explain later. For, in accordance with this imperative, for a value to be put into effect, the old value needs to leave its place to it. On the other hand, the aspects of the realities addressing the essence being are the subtle meanings in the essence being, which are the companions of their crude appearances. These are, as we previously said, value parts which prepare and join each other, and these parts expand the essence knowledge synthesis. We repeat that in studying the topic of living the realities and forgetting them, it should be remembered to discern the material memories which depend on the human brain, on chronological value and systems in accordance with the superficial time comprehension from the impressions of these realities which are deepened in the being and included within the essence knowledge synthesis. This is because, as forgetting the former ones is necessary for a body which is subject to the superficial time necessities, the firm establishment of the latter among the essence knowledge for a being that lives with spherical time comprehension is as natural and imperative. And it is even the necessity of the original purpose.
Yes, we already explained some part of this passage. It starts mentioning, all good or bad events which are connected to these realities make mankind happy or sad. Indeed, each event is a blessing for us, of course, a blessing only if we are aware that each event is an experience we need to gain. And labeling events as good or bad is an old system of training used by our parents and by the generations before them. We now are gaining the awareness of the need of changing even this system of labeling. Personally, I am. Because if there is an event, there is a possibility. And how can we utilize this possibility in the best way? Of course, when we are deep in an event, especially in a so-called bad event, we may get confused, we may get lost within, we may get baffled, it may seem something dark or negative to us, yet we must remember, this is an influence, hence, energy, hence, matter. Whenever a friend or a client talks about the troubling events she or he is going through, or whenever I go through a rough period in my life, my inner voice says, wow, how lucky, so much experience in such a short time. But of course, I don't say it loud. Still, I know that there are so many enriching influences, learnings within such events. Alright, they are enriching, but what becomes enriched by such events? Our reactions and responses to such events cause some formations and transformations in our being. And these, as they gain values accordingly, they become very sublime matter syntheses, hence, enriched. Yes, we cannot understand this, but we can observe the gradual changes within our or others' comprehensions. My being tells me you are down there to experience, so, put all those events happening all the time to good use. Indeed, we are living in such a time period of the world that just in a day, between sunrise and sunset, We receive myriad impressions, experience myriad events and states, and we continuously process all of these influences and information. I think, knowing that we are in a very active time period will be beneficial for all of us. And all we process will be reflected to our being as we sleep, how these will be transformed into subtler matter syntheses, which ones are more valuable for our being. We have no idea about these, but thankfully, our organism is wired in such a way that as we sleep this processing will be done through our dreams. And after this processing, these are turned into subtler matter combinations that enrich the essential knowledge and comprehension of our being. When we look at our experiences and events in our lives through the lens of worldly values, what we see is completely different what our being gleans from the processing of all those experiences. So, let's not make judgments like this experience is better than this or that experience. Maybe, our friends remember the example of a mountain we read about in previous videos. The vista we see at the foot of the mountain is different than the vista we see at the summit of the mountain. Therefore, gradually acquiring such a comprehensive look at the events and experiences we have in our lives, without getting stuck at the details but trying to see things from a wider perspective, would be so beneficial for all of us.
What strikes my attention in this passage is how the system utilizes the crude appearances of the realities. The essence comprehension that expands with essence knowledge benefits from the manner of crude appearances of the realities it lives indirectly via the channel of the body in the world. This is like a screen with two parts, lower is the physical side, belonging the body, and the upper part belongs to the being that is in service to its spirit. Let's imagine the appearances of a crude reality, like a warring period, based on power and violence. Killing is justified by the beliefs and norms of that era. Let's say, blood feud is considered as a normal act. Of course, a human being living in such a time period would have feelings and emotions like vengeance, grudge, punishment, etc., because such emotions would lead or drive to relevant acts. Yes, all those physical or material emotions, feelings, that strong drive to take revenge. All of these are the appearances belonging the world life of the being via the human body it governs. Yet, on the upper screen, from the perspective of the essence being, there are no such appearances like good or bad. The being syntheses the impressions gleaned from that crude lifetime as well, and compare these with the experiences of the previous lifetimes, and deducts a knowledge from this comparison. And we humans become aware of the higher values or emotions not when they are present but when they are absent. For example, we learn the value of love when we are not loved. Or the value of healthy and balanced power when we are powerless, etc. This world school, this whole universe is built by the duality mechanism. The presence of something means at the same time absence of that thing. So, the being eventually reaches the level of not killing or non-violence by going through those kinds of crude experiences, let's say, by encountering the results of such crude actions and decisions, be it physical or conscientious, such as punishments, getting killed or regrets, remorse, etc., in a gradual manner within many lifetimes. Gradually, that being awakens within that reality, begins to see it as it is, and then change happens. And as more beings awaken in this way, then the community awakens and gradually begins to change its ways and norms, searching for different ways of providing justice. Another interesting point in this passage is the plan knows that we would have confusion when we read about realities both lived and forgotten. We had discussed some examples, I think, 3 weeks ago. And in this passage, we read a further explanation about the necessity of forgetting. When the realities are completed, details related to the crude appearances need to be forgotten because for a value to be put into effect, the old value needs to leave its place to it. Had we remembered all details of the realities we completed, we couldn't live our life properly. However, nothing is lost because all those experiences are recorded and stored in the unconscious, in a filtered manner by our being, and when death happens, this stored knowledge is pushed to the subconscious to be synthesized with the previous knowledge from the previous lifetimes. It is like, there is a daily accounting which we do in our sleep. There is a, let's say, annual or periodical accounting when we ask the vital questions to ourselves at the turning points in our life, such as am I on the right path? Is this the life I want to live, etc.? And there is the liquidation, that is, death. And the main accounting is done after death by asking the truly big questions. This life ended, what was my life plan? How much of this plan I actualized? Is there anything left unfinished? If there is, what to do to complete these in another incarnation? And these questions are not asked by our current personality, our current identities. We wrongly assume and expect that this personality and identities of ours will continue forever, or that these are our essence being.
And, of course, we are talking about a completely different matter. That processed knowledge we reflect to our being cannot be understood by us. That knowledge, within very sublime matter syntheses, is transformed into subtle combinations, and these are completely different in form and manner, as we read in this passage. We cannot perceive it by our senses. Just like we cannot see the form of a thought, waves of a sound, vibrations of a smell, of course, all of these can be detected and explained by science, but none of them are tangible for us. We cannot hold or touch these. And because of this, we don't think them as physical or material. Similarly, what we will reflect to our beings from our lifetime is completely different. That is why the book states that this cannot be understood by men. As I mentioned previously, feeding is two-sided. This is an interaction, inter-influencing, but describing this two-sided feeding process in physical or material manner is not possible.
One of our friends says, "It seems that we will never know about the essence knowledge which are good for the being." First of all, this is not a cognitive state of knowing, as we understand in this world system. Also, the impressions we acquire as human beings become the essence knowledge only after death. Just I mentioned, at the liquidation. Only then, the all experiences of the lifetime ended will be compared, assessed and synthesized with all the previous experiences in previous lifetimes of the being. Therefore, we, as living human beings, cannot know what kind of essence knowledge our beings will glean from this lifetime, but we can intuit this. We already read in the divine order and the universe that the being advances and gets developed by choosing conscientiously between the earthly cravings and duty components within its duality unit. Therefore, all of our conscientious acts and deeds and becoming more aware of what kind of state we are in as we act and think, these make us more awake and intuitive about the quality of the essence knowledge. Otherwise, we progress gradually and automatically. For example, somebody gets angry, and if we react, without even thinking and questioning the situation, by getting angry, it means that we are in automatism. However, if we think and act with awareness of the cause and effect chain and also the possible consequences of the steps we took and will take, then it means we have more comprehension regarding the moment and the events life brings along.
Dear friends, I think best thing to do is to utilize the moments in our hands. We can study our life under the light of the knowledge given in this book. What am I doing with my life? What am I going towards? We can develop an observer side to look at our life impartially. Then, we can ask, let's say, which moods and states were active for me last week? In which states and events, I was more inclined to earthly cravings? In which state and event, I was acting from a higher level? We can make these questions a regular part of the period of time before we sleep. How do we feel about the day? At ease or having some concerns about the events of that day? By whom I was influenced most? Or who I influenced most? And if we are sincere and willing, we can analyze our life in this way, and because the divine order and the universe is a book about life, we can read to get clues and inspiration as we analyze our life. And doing this within life will feed us in many levels, I am sure.
Another friend asks, how can we find our life purpose? Well, first of all, what we mean by life purpose is not a big thing as we assume. Life purpose of a person can be seen in the general inclination of the events and situations in his or her lifetime. I can give you 2 clues. First, what makes you truly happy while you do it? What do you do with enthusiasm, without getting tired? One of your life purposes can be found within the answers to these questions. Second clue, what is the thing you avoid most in this life? What is the thing you are most scared of encountering or confronting? Your answer will give you another life purpose. And most of the time, our life purpose is all about confronting with the thing we avoid facing most. Yes, for all of our dear friends, you can consider this a food for thought or as a homework to do until next week.
Yes, both sides of the pendulum are the life purpose for us. As everything else, life purpose is two-sided, so we must assess it both as negative and positive.
Let's say your life purpose is widening your capacity for compassion and love, and your life plan's outline includes having a disabled child. Because a child is not a purchased but faulty item you would return to producer, you cannot shirk from this fact. But you can always assess the quality of your actions and deeds as you raise that child. Because what you do is not important as much as how you do. I mean, the deed or action is the detail, but what you learn and experience as you do and act is much more important for your being. Or, as another example, you have a job but you always complain about the conditions and situations related to your job. The main subject of your complaining contains the clues of the thing you avoid confronting most. Especially, if you are in victim identity, it may mean that you surrendered your own power by shirking your own responsibility. If you are always in that state of victimhood, what you avoid most may be claiming your own power. And let me finish by referring the hierarchy of needs posited by Abraham Maslow. If you remember, at the top of the pyramid of needs is self-actualization. Later, Maslow changed it to self-transcendence. Because, as we start asking such questions and replying sincerely, we can begin to change our reality. Yes, we had a good start.
Yes, I agree. We started nicely. I hope what we discussed today was beneficial to our dear friends who follow us in this series.
Hoping to see you all next week, dear friends.
Good evening, everyone. See you next week.